Good morning, everybody. Is that on? Yeah, it is now. Yeah, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the session that I'm holding this morning. Going digital in permit to work, setting up for success. I assume that's everybody here now, so we might as well make a start. My name's Mick Board, or Michael Board, depending on if you're my mother or not. I'm the ePAS implementation manager. So I work for Prometheus Group. Okay. You've probably seen our stand upstairs. Just a little bit of background from me. I've been Prometheus Group acquired the company I used to work for some 5 years ago. I used to work for a company called Sage Technology. Back in the late 90s, this is just a little bit of history for you. We got engaged, we're in the Latrobe Valley in Victoria. We got engaged by Loy Yang Power to assist them in getting together a permit to work system. They used to have one when they were under the structure of the SEC. When the SEC got broken up, the different generators moved away from the electronic permit to work system they had back then. It was costing them a lot of money. At AGL, well, at Loy Yang Power, back in the day, their union said, well, look, we won't let you give this up unless you replace it with something that's equivalent. So back in the late 90s, they engaged the organisation I was working for. We helped them to go out and look for a permit to work system that would do what they wanted, and we couldn't find one. They weren't happy with anything that came up. They had some very specific needs. So they said, would you build us one? So I was involved with building that back in the late 90s. It went live in early 2000, and sort of since then I've been involved with permit to work. And our product, I'll just give a little plug, is called ePAS, and I'm the implementation manager here in Asia Pacific for Prometheus Group for ePAS, so implementing software for new customers across the region. Since then, the software has changed quite remarkably since that very, very early version, which was the desktop version. Of course, now it's a web-based version, and yeah, more and more features have been built in, and so on and so forth. Just to talk about Prometheus Group, that's us there. We've got offices all over the world. Our main office in Australia is in Brisbane. I'm located in the one down the bottom, which is in the Latrobe Valley in Victoria. And, you know, lots of customers, dealing with probably a lot of you in different ways. And here's our Prometheus platform, where we've got a whole range of software in the ERP space, of which I'm not an expert in all of these. I'm the permit to work guy, so yeah. Okay, now I'm going to refrain from just talking about the product I'm involved with. I'm going to try and make it broader than that. We'll be talking today about digital permit to work, and it's to look at it from going digital, assessing where you're at, preparing to go digital and setting up for success, best practices for implementing a digital permitting solution. Now, you've got to take that this is from the vendor's side of things, okay? So different people in the room will have different experiences, particularly if you have or you are going digital, but this is looking at it from, I suppose, the vendor's side of the fence, what we've seen in our experiences over a number of years, and how to streamline change management processes as well. Okay. Now, the session today, there'll be a number of slides, but hopefully there's a few breaks at times for us to have some conversations and yeah, get a bit of discussion happening. Oh, just by the way, how do I get the timer going on this? I didn't, no, that's okay. We're probably down 5 minutes or so. Thank you. So Digital permit to work. So the first thing I'd like to say is going digital in permit to work is more than just implementing an electronic copy of your current paper permit. Okay, that may or may not sound obvious, but when you're dealing with different customers, some of them, all they want is they want the paper copy of the permit in a digitised format. Really, it's an electronic representation of the safe work process that enforces your rules at your site. Going digital increases efficiency and reduces human error, or at least if you do it right, it should. It's an opportunity to improve the process. To maximise the business benefit, you need to think about the entire process and workflow, not just the document produced. So again, it's about the process. As well as improved safety, there can be financial benefits too. There's a lot of focus on safety, and rightly so, but there can be financial benefits to the business. And there can be challenges along the way. So, what do you see as the drivers or benefits to electronic permitting and safety? I'm going to open it up to the floor. Yep. 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 Yeah. And that's right. You can lever the benefits of electronic and have a workflow built in where you're not passing paper from person to person, sits in somebody's in tray or yeah. 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 Any other thoughts on the benefits? Yep. 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 Anybody else? Yep. They're all good points. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good point. And I probably haven't specifically mentioned that in the slides, but information compliance and data validation, you're picking from lists, you're forced to enter data, in some circumstances anyway, from what the system forces you to do. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Sure. All right. So, if you're at a point where you're still using a manual system, it has the potential to be maybe a bit more error prone, failure to enter relevant requirements consistently. So like we were talking about just before, reliance on training and process documentation because everything's manual, and can be a bit more difficult to enforce compliance. Yeah, lack of maintenance integration. It's a permit from the operations side of things, so there's less visibility there. More manual and potentially time-consuming process bottlenecks, lack of visibility and awareness, difficult to manage SIMOPS, simultaneous operations and other conflicts, and limited analytics. So potentially an increased risk of safety incidents, when you're just doing everything on paper and you don't have a system driving you. Like I said before, maintenance and operations not aligned or less aligned. And you can have delays, waiting for permits, waiting for approvals. Is it stuck in somebody's in tray? What's the situation with it? And, there can be increased costs or, from poorer productivity. So some of the key benefits. Opportunity to incorporate robust permit and isolation workflows with rigorous checks and balances along the way, implementing your process. You can have best practice implemented into it with controlled documents and libraries. You can have things built by plant experts and subject matter experts, to raise the standard of permitting and isolating. You might have a guy in an area of the plant or on a unit or whatever it is of the plant, and he's the expert of isolating that part of the plant, and you'd much rather he did it than this other new guy. But if you've got, in your electronic system, you've got some standard isolation lists or some things like that that have been approved that are really good, that can really help in raising the standard of isolating. And, there's an opportunity to integrate disparate systems. And, you can capture more information electronically, so there's less paper. It's all there on the system, so it's available. So I'll just go through a few more of these. So there's, better searchability and visibility. Everything's electronic. Everything's there. The ability for advanced reporting and analytics and data analysis afterwards, because it's all there. You've got the full work history and the audit trail, capturing key process steps. And you might not need to worry about that, but it's good to have there just in case, you think there's perhaps been a breach or somebody's doing the wrong thing. You can go back and you can check what's happened. And a good permit system makes it easier to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing. And that's what you want to encourage in your business. Having people do the right things and not taking shortcuts. There's also the opportunity to leverage on the benefits of mobility too, to more efficiently implement the process and improve safety. And less need to, if you are implementing with mobility, there's less need to return to the computer when out in the field too. So that can have some benefits there. A few more things. So, here's the electronic information available, and it's fully searchable. It's all there for you, in front of you. And implementing the process in the software, you can have, the checks and balances in place so that making sure all of the isolations and everything's in place before you issue the permit, so that things are done in the right order and all of the safety controls that you need are in place first. So you can have a role-based approach where the workflow activities can only be done by the people that are authorised to do them within the system. You might have people who are authorised as permit issuers, and they're the only ones that can do that. Now, I'm sure that's the case in your paper-based systems too. You would only have certain people issuing it, but it gets further enforced with the electronic workflow, where you can have some controls over that and who can do what in what areas and that sort of thing. And further to that, competencies can be leveraged to ensure work's directed to the people who are competent to work on those things. So if you've got somebody who's competent to work in confined space, well, you can make sure if you have a permit to work on confined space, it's going to those people. It's not going to somebody who's not authorised to go in and work in confined space. And you can have electronic approvals dynamically incorporated in the workflow, so you don't have the paperwork going all over the place, waiting for those to be signed off. It's all there in the system. It's within the workflow. Emails can be sent to remind people if that's how, they want the system set up. And once the right people have signed off based on the type of work that's being done, things can progress. So it's a neat way of incorporating everything together, rather than just having paper and people chasing paper all over the place. And, you know, I know our system and other systems may have this, the ability to do cross-reference safety checks as well up front. So checking to make sure if someone needs a valve isolated as open to make it safe for a work party to work, and then there's another work party that needs that same valve closed, you know, the system can pick it up early that one work party needs it open, one needs it closed. You're not having two lots of tags and locks, you know, going out into the field, and then, well, we can't even isolate this anyway. So there's checks and balances that can go in early in the process to make it more efficient and alert you to what work's going on, what precautions are being put in place. This seems so simple, but printing of danger tags. We've had some of the most excitement at a few sites where you print the danger tags for us? And I guess when you look at it, you know, there was a situation where, you know, he was spending his weekends coming in and writing up danger tags, 150 or 200 danger tags or something, and having the system just print those makes a big difference. So, you know, having the data stored electronically can cut down on printed reports. You may not need to have duplicate or triplicate copies of your permit. Hey, it's all in the system. It's all there. Another benefit that's as part of our system, I'm not sure about others, is we've got a library of work categories or types of work, the hazards that, you know, are there when you're doing that work, and a further database of the controls to put in place for those. So we call that the HIRA, but it's basically a means of risk assessing, putting together a database of that information so it's available for the next time somebody's doing a similar type of job. Here's a list of the hazards and the controls. Hey, if, you know, you think one of those hazards or a couple of those hazards don't apply because of certain circumstances, you can strike them out and the relevant controls also disappear. But it shows that, hey, somebody's actually struck these out. So, you know, the person checking can look to see, well, have they done that? Is that really right for that job? Or should those hazards still be in play? And have we got the right controls to keep things safe? So you can do all of this in a digital solution. It's a bit harder to do this on paper, of course. You know, you can have template libraries of isolation lists, you can have document libraries, you can have plotting showing where the work's taking place. And of course, advanced reporting and charting. So lots of benefits. Have I sold you on moving to a digital system if you're a paper-based system? You're in. And of course, there's the opportunities to also look at going mobile for some of it as well. And that can be through phones and tablets and things like that. It can be for part of the process, or I know our latest software does support basically the whole process mobile as well. So, reasons to go digital. You know, rethinking the JSA, JHA. You can embed this within common permit types, what we call permit requests, or you can keep them as separate documents. So, as an example, some of our customers actually do the JCA as part of producing the permit request. Others, they just keep them as separate documents. So it gives you some flexibility as as for what you can do. You can simplify the process. You can consolidate the different permit types and utilise dynamic rules and statements. So, as an example, I was talking before about different work categories having different hazards and things like that. Well, you can have the software, this software, sorry, it's a little bit of, this is my experience. you can have the software drive the rules. So if somebody's choosing to work in confined space, you can have different checks and balances based on the fact that they'll be working in confined space. If someone needs to do diving, you can have the software say, well, you've chosen the diving work category. That means we need special approval and we need a dive plan attached, whatever the requirement is that your business has. The software is flexible enough to be set up in a way to do those things and drive those requirements based on different types of work. And you can identify the biggest returns and gaps and do things efficiently and safely with compliance. And this is just a quote from a few different customers. Again, this is just our experience. So reduced internal documentation, 98%. This particular company, Woodside, they identified, more hazards, 4 times more hazard controls through the software. So it was better utilising the software for better risk assessing. And reduced permit-related incidences. So you're utilising the software to make it easier for people to do the right thing, harder to do the wrong thing. You've got better visibility, and all of that helps to reduce permit-related incidences. This other one, Kurore, I think they're Japanese. One of our international customers. They save 1.5 hours per morning finishing permits. Issued 8,000 permits per week after implementation. So, if you're saving 1.5 hours per morning finishing permits, jobs are getting done faster, things are getting back online quicker, and there's cost savings there. This particular customer saved 815 hours in overtime during a 40-day outage. So you're saving overtime, you're getting things on quicker, you're getting things off quicker, you're getting things back quicker. It's getting things back into production. It's dollars in the pocket. So, yeah. So, my next question, has anyone implemented an electronic permit system? And the second question, what was your experience? Yep. Did you have any issues along the way?
Teething issues as you introduce new things, but it's well adopted on site, it's well used, but it's about how to use it to your advantage, so you can save time and that. So the time saver, it can actually cost you time if you don't use it right as well.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think the most important part's safety. Driving a process, doing it right, but you can get some time benefits too.
On the safety side, I think it's great because the traceability is there, and therefore people make sure they follow the system, and so everybody's following the system, and there's less shortcuts taken.
Yep. Anybody else? Sure.
Depending on the complexity of the permit, you might need 2 or 3 authorisations.
Yes.
So if I'm at the coalface creating the work permit, and I need 2 other signatures, approvals. Where and how does that happen? Does an email get sent, or has someone also got to have the program open at their desktop? How does that happen?
Yeah, and it can depend. I mean, talking about the software that we have, so you can have different types of work drive the need for different levels of approval, okay? And in terms of getting that approval, emails can be sent. So it can be done via an email or some other form of notification. If 2 or 3 people are together, you can have that second person come across and they can make the approval on the screen that's open at the moment. So they don't necessarily have to log out and log in. They can make their approval there and then. So I guess it's notifying the person somehow, whether that's electronically through the system. The system itself will tell you that there's approvals there for you to enact. But yeah, then how you go about approving, well, you can either log in or you can go to where that's open, you get 2 or 3 people together and they can do their approval in that part of the system then and there. Does that make sense?
I think, Mick, that, I think some of the questions you really speak to, and Lisa and I spent 45 minutes here yesterday, I think specifically talking about this question and our experience, but I think that really highlights, because Mick, you've probably seen 15 different ways to do that,
Sure.
which I think speaks to the fact that you need to focus on and know what your process is and what you need it to be before you get too heavy on what does the solution do. Because I think, knowing ePAS very well, I can hear, Mick, you would be thinking, well, you can configure that in many ways. Take our experience, for example, with the email question, which we've seen as common. Where does the system send emails? We made a decision at the time that we would use that. We didn't use that functionality because we didn't want the electronic permit to work system to reduce face-to-face communication. And so we found we still gained all those benefits that Mick has described, to a great degree, but we made configuration-based decisions to not use this, or the approvals question. Yep, 2, we've seen some, and that is so different depending on what it is your process requires as to where they happen, how many, who does it. The system can obviously systemize that, but we encourage people to start with knowing what it is you need and want before worrying too much about where it will happen. Because I think you'll find today the systems are so configurable that you can probably work that out if you've got some non-negotiables in the process.
And Jason's point's a good one about emails. We have a lot of customers that get very enthusiastic about emails until the system goes live. And then they start to realise that there's a lot of spam happening. There's just emails flying everywhere. And so things like emails are better targeted for, they can end up as a lot of noise. So how do you say which ones are the important ones versus which ones are the
A quote
noise?
I used at the time, Mick, was if I bought my wife flowers every day, when I buy flowers for her birthday, they didn't matter. And so, and that speaks to, when is it important, right?
You didn't. Lisa, you haven't told your husband that one, have you? No, you've left Jason's quote alone from that. Yeah, but that's right. Email spamming can be a challenge too. So you've got to have an effective way of communicating, and face to face is very important, definitely in the permitting side of things. Okay. Any further comments, questions on that? Okay. Assessing where you were at. So if you're looking at implementing permit to work, or an electronic permit to work process, I should say, it's important to understand where your organisation is at the moment. And you can do this by reviewing your current processes and looking at the whole the whole way you do permitting overall. And that can be by reviewing processes, looking at your paper forms, looking at inconsistencies across the site or the sites. And you can look at it as a real opportunity for standardisation. Something to think about: what bottlenecks do you have and how can these be improved? Safety: could we make things safer by implementing this? Could mobility play a part of the process? So, reviewing your processes. I mean, you should all have processes of some sort, I would have thought, at site. What permit-related processes does your organisation have documented? You know, typically we find that the quality and quantity varies across organisations. Often these are in the form of detailed procedures. Sometimes these can be quite large, and often broken down to major risk-based types of work. What business workflows does your organisation have documented? It's always something to think about. And does your current process meet all the legislated requirements? It's always something to keep your focus on as well. When it comes to reviewing your standard permit documentation, I mean, you'll have your permit to work and you'll have other permit types potentially. You'll have probably some standard isolation lists somewhere. That's fairly common. Some isolation check sheets or instructions. You may have some switching instructions. Your standard isolation lists may just be a list of isolations. They may be down to detailed instructions of how you go about isolating. You might have some standard risk assessments stored somewhere. Typically with your permits, I assume somebody would be attaching a, whatever you call it, a JSA, a JSCA, or SWIMS. You'll have all manner of different documentation, different forms for different work activities, probably different things if you're doing confined space, working at heights, excavation, etc., etc. And excavation's a good one for this multiple levels of approval too. Usually there needs to be a few levels of approval when you're doing excavation type work. So all of these are different types of work that can have different documentation, different forms in paperwork and that sort of thing, each probably requiring different approvals and all of that. So where are things stored? So when you're reviewing your standard permit documentation, you know, where are all these forms? Are they all on the network somewhere? Where do you keep things like rescue plans or other documents? Are they on your intranet? Are they on your DMS, your network, somebody's USB drive, a C drive somewhere? Is there change control around these, and how do you manage change control around them? So they're all challenges. Do you have internal registers? You know, a confined space register, a safety systems register. Hey, if you've got passing valves, do you have a passing valves register? You know, a lot of organisations have these sorts of things in different places. So again, where are things stored? Where are your drawings stored? Do you have images that you could use for plotting? And your competencies, you know, you'd be issuing permits to competent people. Where's all of that information? How do you know when you're issuing a permit that someone's competent to receive it? All of that sort of thing. So these are all, where are things stored? Things for you to think about, because they all present challenges and opportunities that you've got to think about when you're implementing a digital permit system, or at least you should be thinking about when you're implementing a digital permit system, because it's an opportunity to raise the standard with how you're doing things. So, inconsistencies and opportunities. Are the current processes and practices standardised across your site, because, you know, sometimes we go to customers and, well, we do it this way, and, oh no, well, we do it this way, and they do it wrong, you know. And then if you're a multi-site organisation, and Jason and Lisa were talking a little bit about, they were implementing for a multi-site organisation which had 3 different permit systems and all of that, the challenges getting go up. So how do you get a standard set of processes and consolidate it all together? So they're the challenges that you've got with inconsistencies, but there's opportunities to raise the standard, bring them all together. Are there shortcuts being taken? That's a key question. There's plenty of places where you go, well, yep, no, we do everything just like this. Yeah, but for this job, we need to do this, and we need to take a shortcut. So it's an opportunity to get rid of those shortcuts, to analyse why those shortcuts are taking place, and building something in so that, you know, if at the moment it's really necessary because there was no other way around it, well, let's use this as an opportunity to do things better and remove those shortcuts. And remove, you know, safety breaches due to not following the permit process. And I keep bringing up legislative, but it's, again, you know, it's important that we're following what the law says, making sure that your process meets those legislative requirements. And can your current process be improved? What bottlenecks do you have now? And could these be reduced with an electronic process? Are there safety concerns that need to be addressed as part of all of this? So, here's a question to the room. Where are you at in your journey of adopting digital permitting? I'm going to give this to Colin for a second because he was talking to me very quickly before.
Yeah, thanks. Colin Robertson, Blue Scope Steel. So talking to Mick just before the start, we're currently developing a digital permit to work system. So we're likely to issue our first permit probably end of this month, beginning of next. But it's been a struggle to get to this point. Probably the biggest issue has been integrating to the various systems. So Mick put up the slide there about where's your documents. Every one of these is where our documents are. All of the above is the answer. So that's been a challenge. Probably the next challenge is what you've highlighted in some of the group actually talked about as well, is we took an approach of not reviewing and not rewriting our safe system of work process. We just went to digitize it. And it was interesting, you opened by saying that's not a good idea, but to take on the task of reviewing how we do safe system of work permits would have been a massive task in itself. The digitization has been a large enough task. The other point that one of the benefits that was mentioned was about the competencies and ensuring you're using the correct people to do the correct jobs. Well, we've found a number of gaps in that. How do we actually confirm that competency? And it's really going to be one of the benefits of the going digital. We'll actually be able to confirm that, as opposed to, well, I know Mick, I've worked with him for years, I know he's competent, I know he's accredited, and that's all fine until something goes wrong. This type of system will take that away from us. That's one of the real proposed benefits that we're putting forward with this. Yep.
Thanks, Colin. I appreciate the feedback. Anybody else? Is someone on a journey at the moment of adopting? Yep. I think there's a microphone coming, so.
and we've found that a lot of our processes, that different things are being done through different processes in the business. So whether it's the risk assessment, lotto, all of those things. I suppose my question for you is, if the permit to work system is not integrated with those other elements like capability, lotto, all of that sort of thing, is it still worth going digital?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, all that the system that I'm used to has lockout tag out as part of it. You know, it has an isolations component. So I guess it's worth looking at what you can see as the benefits in, you know, the way you're trying to go forward with it. If you can see that it's going to be quite beneficial for the business, it's going to put the right processes in place. Is it particularly around permitting itself that you're looking at moving forward?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that can be beneficial too. Probably more of our customers over in the US have the electronic workflow more for permitting than, no, I'm probably saying that wrong. Here in Australia, a lot of the customers we implement, they will incorporate the isolations and the permitting and all of the different other components, confined space, etc., all in the one software package. Some of our other customers that I have seen overseas, they may just be concentrating on permits for the moment. They may not look at everything else. So I guess it's having a look and having a think about where you want to get to. Is it at the moment you just want to incorporate the permitting? Do you want to look at the isolations down the track and other areas like confined space and excavation? What do you want to do?
Yeah, that was the idea, that it would have the release for work and confined space, hot works, all of those permits in the same place, but just we've got different procedures for lotto, we've got different procedures for risk assessment, and
Right.
yeah, whether or not it's worth proceeding with a digital solution if we're not integrating those aspects of it or those elements of it.
Sure. Well, if it's going to provide benefits with what you're doing just at the moment, you could proceed with that and look to incorporate the others down the track. Yeah. Anybody else? Don't want to put everybody on the spot, but it's great to have some feedback. It's much better than just listening to me. Sure. Okay. Preparing to go digital, setting up for success. So this sort of incorporates it a little bit. Know where you'd like to get to. And, you know, that may be a single or a multi-phased approach. It could be and that could be, you know, a single or multi-phase approach across a single site, or it could be, you know, you have different phases bringing on multiple sites as well. But you might take the easy steps first and get some big wins on the board. And sorry, I didn't get your name, but that was, you know, you might be doing that now. You might be getting the first phase in, getting it all working, and you can always review and look to incorporate other things later on. But it's important to get the wins on the board. You know, there's no point taking on something and getting it absolutely perfect if it's going to take you years and years and years and years and years before you roll it out. Otherwise, you won't get the benefits till then. So I keep saying use this opportunity to improve your processes, but you might notice I've put in here in brackets, if you can, and this, you know, this raises a good point, because what I wanted to say there is not everybody can change their permit processes at that point in time. We've certainly seen that with customers. It's been a case for some of them where, look, it's going to be 3 years. If we change our processes, it's going to be 3 years before they fully get approved, before we can actually go down the path. So it's not always something that's possible, particularly, and there can be a range of reasons for that. You can be dealing with different bodies, there can be union-related stress, there can be all manner of reasons why it can take a few years to actually be able to start changing your processes and get them far enough through so that they're rubber stamped as being your new processes. What I'd suggest to you is, when you're implementing or you're looking at implementing, work with your vendor to understand the software and the benefits it can provide. Okay? It sort of sounds obvious, but it can make a big difference, because there's often been people that have done, we're all doing the same things in slightly different ways, but trying to achieve the same outcomes. And so the way you do things at site, someone else may do it slightly different in terms of the way they use the permit system, but they're still getting to the same outcome. So it's always worth looking at what is in the software package already to get you to where you want to get to, rather than just saying, oh, look, it doesn't do it exactly the way we want it done, so we'll ask for an enhancement to do it. And then all of a sudden, there's 3 or 4 ways in the system of doing the same thing. And we have had customers come back to us afterwards and said, well, you were right, I wish we'd listened to you. We've built this thing in and we really didn't need to. We could have used what was there already. So leverage those discussions for a better outcome. And be open-minded and flexible enough to look at the software and try and use its strengths. And this is what I was talking about a second ago. Look at what others have done and, avoid trying to reinvent the wheel, because, we've had wheels around for a long time and, yeah, they're pretty streamlined these days. So look at trying to utilise software where you can, and leverage the benefits out of that without trying to reinvent things. And if you're already coming from digital, because some organisations have done that, they've had to transition across to it, or they've chosen to transition across to a new system, review the pros and cons of the new software and analyse the differences from where you were coming from. Some common challenges along the way. Data. These systems require data, and sometimes when you're looking into it, the data can be incomplete, it can be accurate. On the face of things, it can look like it's all there, but you need to go in and you need to analyse, is the data that we've got accurate and what we need for this new system? And, there can be poor data governance practices in place in some organisations. We've had a couple of situations where, data's all there, and then when we've actually looked at it, the data didn't reflect what was needed at all. Another common challenge, and it's an important one, getting the right level of commitment from the business. Okay, is this project really committed to higher up the tree? Because you're going to need that support at times to implement the change that's needed. And we talked about this before, but the non-alignment of processes across the organisation, you want it really to be everybody is working in the same way. And digital can do that for you. And I don't know if you've heard this, we've heard this many, many times. We go to a site and how we do things at our site, that's best practice. But them over there, no, they're no good. And some of the best practice we've seen, you'd be worried. best practice, people saying they do best practice isn't always best practice. And a common challenge with these projects is unrealistic schedules. Okay? If the schedule's unrealistic, it just puts stress on the project in many different ways. It puts stress on the people who are trying to get things together, get their jobs done, get together the data that they need whilst still doing, whatever they're doing. It puts stress on the vendor as well when we're trying to meet deadlines. And so it's important to establish a realistic schedule. Change management. I mean, all projects, I think, have challenges with change management. You're trying to introduce change as part of implementing a new digital permit system. And we all know humans, I'm probably the world's worst, can be resistant to change. So what can you do about that? You can try and combat that by effective communication across the organisation. You can get key stakeholders involved with the project. Frank's, he's the expert in that area. He has all the respect of all the people. If we can get Frank involved on this project, if we can bring him along, he buys into it and he becomes a champion for it. So it's important to look at how to get others involved and get buy-in with this. Another common challenge, internal politics. I've seen internal politics kill projects before, and there's nothing anybody could do about it. It was just, this manager went up against that manager, and yep. Communications across the site. Communication's really important when you're introducing a new project like this. And I've put these as common challenges. These can all be overcome. And there may be more, but these are just some of the ones that I could think of. Data governance. Do we have the data that we need? Where are we getting? It's common for a permit system to require a plant structure. Ours has a plant structure with isolation points incorporated into it. So where's the plant data coming from? Often it'll come from an ERP if you've got an ERP system. The isolation points, where will they come from? Often they'll come from the ERP as well. SAP, Maximo, whatever, they all have some form of a plant hierarchy. I'll talk about isolation points a bit later. Where do the people come from? HR systems often have people in them, so you can get some of the information from there. Competencies for people, where are we going to get that information from? So all these systems that have all of these, they all need the information from somewhere, whether it's entered into the system and maintained exclusively in the permit system, or whether it's done through some form of integration with other systems. Documents, do we have a DMS? Are the documents on the document management system? Is the latest copy there? How's the revisioning of documents done? So again, that's another data governance thing. Isolation lists, or so the information about doing your standard isolations. Do you have isolation lists somewhere? Where are they? Are they in a Word document, an Excel document? Are they in other structured data somewhere on the system? I talked some more. Our system has, like I said, this HIRA, which has the work categories, the hazards and controls, and it's like an engine that drives things. You choose what work you're doing. It says, okay, you're doing that work. These are the hazards and these are the controls. Because you're doing these types of work, these are the approvals that are needed. These are the documents that need to be attached. This is the workflow changes we need, all of that sort of thing. Where does that data come from? That's got to be maintained somewhere. Plotting images and drawings and things like that, where are they kept? And we talked a little bit about that before. And lock boxes and lock sets. Our system has lock boxes and lock sets in them, a record of all of those. So they've got to be managed and maintained as well. So some of those would be maintained exclusively in the system. Some may have integration with them. So when it comes to integration, which system's the source of truth? So source of truth's a really important thing. If your SAP or Maximo or whatever your ERP system, it will often be the source of truth for your plant data, for your hierarchy. If you're integrating. If you're not, you're managing two systems. You've got your SAP system or whatever, and so if there's a change to the plant and new plant data needs to be incorporated, it's got to go into both systems. If they're not integrated, and if they are integrated, they'll go into the source system and it will flow through to the other system. And yes, you can have integration with maintenance systems. So, a common one we have is, a work order operation can be used to trigger an ePAS, the creation of an ePAS permit request, which will go on to a permit. And you'll be able to see the status of the permit back on the work order operation. And also there's the opportunity for integrated scheduling. So some of these systems have, integration between systems. I was talking before about in our system, the plant hierarchy. Well, what's the source of truth? And where integration's in place, that's usually the ERP system. The isolation points is a bit of a funny one because the isolation points, some of the data for what we have as isolation points will live in the ERP system, and that will go down to things like valves. Often there'll be valves in the ERP system. But further down, there can be other sorts of isolation points that we need that won't fit within the ERP system. Some electrical switches where you need to switch things off and that sort of thing. Or there's some others like that. And they have to be added into the data so that they're there in the system. So we can have a case where for some customers, some of the data is in SAP that flows through via integration to ePAS, and also some lower level data just lives in ePAS. So in that case, there's two sources of truth. People and competencies. A number of our customers, and I guess they're mainly they're SAP customers that we're seeing, but a lot of them have competencies integrated through SuccessFactors LMS. So I don't know if any of you are SAP customers or what the situation is, but we see SuccessFactors LMS a lot of the time for our integration of competencies. We have one customer that has integrated with their gate system. Okay, so, and that's a situation where if a work party member or the holder of the permit leaves without signing off the permit, they're blocked at the gate. So they can't actually leave site. And that caused a little bit of angst when that was introduced because it was found out that a few people were heading home for lunch. And so, yeah. But they've been running that quite effectively there. And I know, when you talk to mine sites and places like that, it's, the frustration of, well, where's Fred? Well, he caught the 2 o'clock plane. Well, why is his lock still here? Yeah. So yeah, data integration, and there can be integration with downstream systems and other reporting. This is just a couple of screenshots of, this is another Prometheus tool, our Prometheus web scheduler, and we've got one of our customers. You might see, I don't know, is that working? Yep. Can you see the orange, green, red, orange? They're actually traffic lights, and so that's to show that they're using web scheduler, there's some integration, and that green one's good to go, that green permit's good to go. The red's definitely not, And so it's sort of like a traffic light arrangement. So that's just showing some integration between those two systems. So integration can be a good thing, but it can also be a challenge to get right. You know, everybody wants the one source of truth. Yeah. Data preparation and collection. So you're implementing a new electronic permit to work system. How do we get the data together? Well, often for us, we provide customers with spreadsheets in certain formats, and there can be other tools. But somebody's got to go away and get all this together. And it's not, sometimes there's a bit of work involved. So what we would recommend is start the data gathering early in the process. If you can, allocate adequate resources, because everybody's already got a day job. And so, you know, putting the extra responsibility and work on people who are already very busy, yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And I'd also suggest focusing on the big rocks up front. There's different data that needs to be captured. Inadequate data can cause issues later. So if you can concentrate on the big rocks up front. For us, like I said, we have this HIRA, this engine behind the scenes. You know, I'm not sure whether other customers have something like this or not. Some may not. But again, it's all of the work categories that have the hazards that apply to each of those work categories, and then the controls to mitigate each of those hazards. And that gets to be quite a lot of data if you do this extensively. So it's one of our big rocks that we say to the customers, look, spend some considerable time up front getting this data together, put in place the adequate resources to do this. So at a recent customer that's worked on that, they've had a dedicated person and he's done a great job. So, yeah. The other one is the isolation points. In our system, we go right down to the individual switches in cabinets if they need to be individually isolated. Sometimes individual fuses, anything that's going to need, you know, a tag, anything that needs to be isolated, we go to that level of detail. So that can be like, if you look at a upside down, well, if you look at a tree, you know, sometimes this is the leaves on the tree that we're needing to get put in if they're not put in. So that can be a decent task as well. So they're our two big rocks, the HIRA and getting the isolation point data together. And I mean, there's other data that needs to be collected. This takes a bit of time, but it depends what your organisation has, you know, people, roles, competencies. As I said, with competencies, often that will come through an integrated solution like success factors. You may have isolation lists, you may have step libraries, some have, some haven't. And other things like your lock boxes and your lock sets and other miscellaneous information. But yeah. Mobility. Further improve efficiency and safety through intelligent mobile solutions. Can you think of areas in your permit process that could be improved by a mobile solution? Yep.
Thank you. Especially, you know, going out to remote locations and being offline. I guess the challenges are, how does that solution work for them? That's right. That's right. And these are some of the challenges. And there's a lot of different conversations too around mobility. You know, is it offline? Is it online? There are differences. Yeah. Is anybody else thinking about mobility?
like Lisa said, it certainly seems to be something that's coming in more for what we're finding in power generation around things like the wind turbines, where previously all the generation was centralised in a power station. Everybody was on site, all work was taking place there. Now we're seeing more and more, well, hang on, Frank's going to go off. Frank's doing a lot, but Frank's got to go off to do some work on the turbine, the wind turbine, and he's going to be away from the central site. He's going to be doing his work remotely. So mobility, I think, is an opportunity. It provides an opportunity to be able to do that work offline on a mobile device and come back and resync. Any other thoughts on mobility in the permit space? We've had one previously. Maybe I'll keep going then if there's no other no other thoughts on that, because I'll talk about what I was going to talk about in the slides ahead. So benefits of mobility, what parts of the permit process can really benefit from mobility, and the difference between online versus offline, and things to watch with offline. So mobility as a concept can add some benefits. Some people can use it for capturing data. You've got your tablet or whatever with you, and you can capture data or whatever as it occurs, or certainly go through the process as it occurs. It can help to reduce the back and forth between the field, back to the office, back, forth. All of this can take time, and it can help to reduce human error too. One area that we've had for a while, some of our customers here in Australia use it, is around the area of mobile isolations. So taking the device with you out to the field, being at an item of plant, am I at the right point? Scan, it could be an RFID, it could be a barcode or something. So am I at the right point to start with? Make my isolation and validate it in the system. So all of that taking place out in the field. A second checker coming through and scanning that this is isolated and verified. That can be done through mobility. And some of our customers are using that. It could be used in the case of work party members signing on and off. We've got another solution for that that's, based on the software itself at a terminal, but mobility could be used for that, and for things like confined space, entering gas tests. That could be done on a mobile device. Saves you going back and forth. Entry and exit, could be a means. If you don't have a computer there, it could be a means of capturing who's entering or exiting the space. So that's all logged electronically and fed back. And, there's the opportunity for digital permits, which would reduce paper. You've got the permit electronically on the screen. Now, we don't have any customers here in Australia at the moment that are doing pure digital permits, but these are all, opportunities, and it will move more and more that way, I think, over time. And with mobility, we were talking before about someone jumping in the car, going out to site. That's what Lisa was talking about, and the ability of online versus offline. So you jump in the car, head out to site, that's probably more a case of offline. You make all your changes on the device and it syncs when it's back in range. That would work well in that situation. We were having a bit of a talk internally in the office about it, and online is better in the sense that the permit system, the central permit system's always up to date. It's, if you're doing something online, you're updating the central system. And so there's no issues at all with synchronization or Everybody's seeing that everything's up to date, as it is. The one caution with offline is while you're offline, whatever solution you've got, you just need to make sure that, for example, if you were using a mobile device for recording people being in a confined space or something, you want to make sure that while this device is offline and is going to sync later, so your main computer system at the moment, your main software doesn't know that there are people being recorded on the digital device, you would want to make sure that the main software then didn't, somebody says, okay, that job's finished, and starts down the close-up process. That would be a very dangerous thing if there were still people in the space with the device, just because the software wasn't put together correctly. So it's just something to be mindful of, the dangers of offline. The software has to be set up right for that. So you just don't have people left in a confined space or something while the main computer system thinks it's okay to close it off, and people start going down the path of closing it off. Now, you probably wouldn't do that anyway, but I'm just trying to highlight a danger of where something's offline and somebody's looking at the main online system and thinking it's okay to do some steps when it's not okay to do some steps. Some best practices for implementing a digital solution. This is just a typical brief process that we go down, but it's just very, very typical, probably cut down in the steps, but usually there's contract preparation and approval and execution up front. We would do what's called a process discovery, where we go to your site. Before that, we would have asked to have a look at your processes. We'll go out, we'll conduct a workshop on site. After that, there's usually some rapid prototyping or setting up of the software. Data collection is taking place at site while that's all occurring. Hardware's being ordered. Systems are also being stood up. During the implementation phase, once all the data's collected, it would get imported. As part of all of this too, I mean, I haven't got it written here, but there might also be integration taking place. So, well, I have actually, configuration and integration on the fourth point. So during the implementation phase, there's data import and setup taking place. Hardware's being set up. Some customers we have hosted, for others it's on premises, and I'm sure that's the same for other organisations or other vendors as well. There's configuration and integration, and we're putting together the permits, the certificates and the reports, their workflows, what they look like, all of that. When everything's done, there's a user acceptance testing phase, then there's training, go live with hypercare support and support. That's the process in a nutshell. But getting back to some of the best practices, we've talked about some of these before, but understand your processes. You know, provide copies of them to the vendor up front so they have an opportunity to have a look at them before coming and meeting with you. We talked about ensuring the right level of commitment from the business. That's important. You need the support across the business to bring the project through. You need to set up proper project governance, and I mean this is just common sense. Set up your project managers. You know, there's usually one from the customer side of the fence as well. One from the vendor side of the fence as well. So have regular project meetings. Keep on top of things. Keep the schedule up to date. Track what's happening with the project. Are we on track? Where things are changing, we need to change as well. Manage change control within all of this. Another key set of best practices. Schedule regular communication about the project across the business. It's amazing the difference this makes. You know, if you're actually communicating about the project, where it's at, what's happening, it gives the opportunity for people to feel engaged. They can see something's coming. It's not a total surprise for them when it does. Include the right resources on the project. So target key people. Tap them on the shoulder for their involvement. These are the key influencers, the people that are seen as the experts in their area, their field, that others look up to. If you involve them, they can become the site champions, and they'll share their excitement for the project with colleagues. Of course, ensure legislative requirements are met. That's really important. Can change be made to your process to drive improvement? That's a question. You may not be able to change your processes. If you are looking at changing your processes, please do them before or, in respect of what's happening with the system, or consider them as part of the system. Don't plan to do them 6 months after implementing the system, which some have, which then causes grief because the system's implemented in a particular way and it doesn't meet their new processes. So if you're going to change your processes, look at doing them up front. Look to drive improvements to work practices through the software. Like I said, it's not just an electronic copy of your paper permit, and work with the vendor. We've talked about all of these before, but I just wanted to reinforce these as these are some of the things we see as the best practices. And as I said, involve key people, but it's important to have a clear decision maker. I was talking with Lisa yesterday about the benefits of having a BA on the project from the customer side, and I'd had some internal discussions, and I think the conclusion that I'd come to is if you've got a good BA, a good business analyst on the customer side that can work with the vendors team, that makes a big difference because they can go and find a lot of the information. They can help to provide clear decisions on the project, because there's nothing worse than having, it's important to involve all the key stakeholders, but it makes it impossible if you've got 15 different opinions, decisions being fed back to the vendor. So it's important for there to be a key person, and the project manager may have some involvement there, but if you've got someone like a business analyst involved, it really does help things. We talked about this before. Look at how others have done things and try to avoid reinventing the wheel. Consider mobility. It's an opportunity to think about. I think more and more will be coming over the years ahead in terms of mobility, and maximize benefits with integration. So I talked about some things there where it can be done. I talked about data governance. Do we have the data we need? If not, how do we get this? What systems require integration? And understanding the source of truth and the data flows. If you've got an ERP system that's sending data into your permit system and updating like a status in your ERP system, understand that flow of data. It's some customers think, it's just a switch that needs to be turned on. There's a little bit more to it than that to get it right. Get in early and concentrate on your big rocks in terms of the data that needs to be put together and prepared. Consider dedicated resources for some of this. Like I said, people have day jobs. Where possible, aim for a higher level of quality of data at go live. And by that I mean, sometimes we've got to compromise on the quality of things, but where possible, aim high, because it does make a difference if you've got good quality data. Ensure adequate testing resources and test plans are prepared, because when you get the software, it's up to you to test it to make sure it's actually working to your needs. And don't skimp on the training. You know, budget for full training, and not just train the trainer. It's good to have full training implemented across all of your people, and that may need to have involvement from some site people as well to explain the why. Why are we doing things this way to keep people on board? And if you're doing training, or when you're doing training, please make sure you schedule it to take place just prior to go live. There's been, we've seen situations where the training's done too early, it's done, and all of a sudden the project's taken a bit longer, and then come go live, people have forgotten, they haven't used the system for 6 months, and they've needed some more training. So training just before the people are ready to actually use the system is really good. And avoid the temptation of going live when you're having a shut. I mean, we have had customers that do that, and it's all been successful, but it does add a level of stress. It's better if you can go live just in your normal day-to-day operations, rather than doing or putting that pressure on yourself for going live during a shut. Multiple sites. If you've got multiple sites that you're implementing at, stage the implementations. Don't try and go live all at once with all of them. And pick your first site carefully. Pick one that's conducive to change, and get the wins on the board there. Quick question, what communication strategies have worked well for you when you've introduced a new system across the business?
From our experience, we have implemented an electronic permit to work system across, 7 different sites, as Mick talked about earlier, and all of them came from pretty much different permitting systems, some electronic, some not. I think one of the things that we did in terms of ensuring that we had a good communication strategy was involving key stakeholders from each of the sites. Through almost a decision-making committee. We found that really gained insights into each of their sites, into their different processes, and also, that buy-in from each of them as well. So that, I feel, really worked well. And that was almost a governing body across the whole project implementation, but also beyond that in terms of ongoing management of that system.
Yeah, fantastic, Lisa. Thank you. Yep.
Just for one of our treatment plants that has a little gas component to it. And I think just being completely honest and not having it perfect, and working together as a team to iron out the problems and improve it as we go before we go into a digital system. So really having our process nailed down before we push it into a system.
Yep. Thank you. I'll just move into change management. I'm starting to run out of time, but I'm at the end, so we'll have time for a couple of questions at the end. Here's a quick one anyway, but can you think of examples where change management's been done well in your organisation? It's a bit of a tricky question, but can you think of any examples where it has been done well? I mean, managing change is a tricky thing, and it needs to get people on board. You don't do it well? Yeah. Okay.
I think what often happens is change management gets delegated. I think it's something you can't necessarily delegate. And you really need to see, the people who are involved in the project. There's not one change manager, although someone often carries that title. Ultimately, everyone who's involved is a change manager. And you're doing that in every conversation, in every interaction. And a lot of that stuff occurs off the plan. There's often a change management plan, but most of the change in our experience comes from everywhere else. But it's the the change management plan, which seems to draw the attention as to that's where we're driving the change, yet it's every other conversation, which is often having the change. And I think just that mindset can be very helpful with, don't need to make it a big title of change management because, change, of course, is inevitable. So we're all doing it at all times. And I've simply seen just that mindset be very powerful.
Thanks, Jason. I'm running out of time, so I'll just finish off my last couple of slides and we'll have some questions. I'll open it up for questions. Project governance. So we think that's important with project management. So just having, the weekly meetings and that sort of thing, keeping up with where things are at, managing risks, but also having a communication plan. Understanding your regulatory requirements, we talked about that. Some of those could be with internal and external bodies, so making sure that that's all there. But we talked about getting upper management and key stakeholders on board, so having the right people on board, so that communication's happening and people are aware, and focus on adoption and training. Don't cut this budget. That's important. Communication, it's key. Regular internal communication across the business. It just helps people know what's happening. That thing that they may have heard about 6 months ago, but they've gone, they haven't heard anything about it in the organisation until they've been invited to come along to training. That can be a real, people can get their back up if they're not involved, if they don't know what's going on, if they're not hearing about it. I mean, they may get their back up if they do, but at least it gives them the opportunity to find out about it and feel like they're being consulted on it all. I talked about involving your end users and your champions. I can't emphasise that enough. That makes a big difference on a project like this. And remind everyone of the issues and challenges that the existing system has, so that they can really see the benefits of the new system. But that's it from me. Are there any questions on anything I've had to say today? Yeah?
Going back a little bit, but you were talking about the data and sort of data integrations. I suppose, especially around the asset hierarchy, I was just wondering what, in your experience, is the best way to do that integration, and is it beneficial to have the whole asset hierarchy living in the permit system, or to have some other case-by-case integration where the information is passed back and forth between works and asset management and permits?
Yeah, so in our case, and I mean I can only really talk to our software, we basically have a copy. Is it the whole hierarchy? I mean, some of our customers strip out the bits that just aren't relevant, okay? So it's the hierarchy in respect to what you would need to be taking permits out for. That would be certainly put in. And where integration's in place, you would have integration for those items. So if a change is made in the source system, whether it be SAP, Maximo or Ellipse or whatever, that change would flow through, or new items would be added underneath if there were new items added in the source system. So you don't need to put everything that's in a SAP or a Maximo or whatever into ePAS or other permitting software, I would say, if it's not relevant to permitting. Okay, you would just include the things in there.
And is that likely to be via some sort of daily sync or a live update? Do you have performance issues with your systems if the integration's too live? Yeah, so the different customers have done it in different ways. It can be a live sync, or it can be a batched set of changes run daily and whatnot. Pros and cons of both.
Yeah, but it's been different. We've had it done in different ways for different customers, depending on how they've integrated.
You don't have a favourite?
I mean, from some respects, a live sync's always good if you're just taking changes as they're occurring in the source system, because what you're then seeing in your permit system reflects what's in the source system, you know, virtually instantaneously. If it's a batched thing that happens nightly or whatever, well, you're 24 hours behind from the get-go. May not be an issue so much for the plant side of things, but it could be an issue more for people and their competencies. So, you know, if somebody turns up at site and they need to be, you know, put in the system, and it's going to take them 24 hours for their competency to flow through, so they basically can't have their permit, that's a big issue. But if they can be put in and it can flow through relatively quickly there, yeah, that can make a big difference. Yeah.
We've seen a number of issues beyond the actual data flow or the integration. What I've often seen is that they can have different purposes, and so where it can get tricky and where people tend to have arguments here is the people who typically own the typical plant structure aren't necessarily the permit administration group, and so they're looking at it with a different lens. And so, for example, if that control isn't tightly managed, the person who owns the plant hierarchy says, oh, I don't need, what are all these low-level switches, to use your example, Mick, doing here? And they blow them away. And then, yep, it syncs, and then in the permit system, they've disappeared. Okay, well, we'll re-add them and it'll resync, but if they were being used upon within a template library, that action myopically could have destroyed, the view and the lens for someone else. And we have seen just in the design of this, once you can, yes, technically it can work very well, the actual use and purpose and that disagreement can become, we've seen it result in, no, they have different purposes, they'll be managed separate. And so they often, we've seen it start from the same source and then just have a separate change control process to ensure when there's a change, it's managed in the relevant sources or the relevant destinations with the right purpose. And so I've found the challenges are often beyond that technical point.
Another challenge too can be that your operations people that go out to the plant, the labelling on the plant may be different to the value that's in the SAP or Maximo or whatever system, and so then that causes a challenge as well. So ways we've managed that in the past is that information's been, we might have kept that information in another field in the system that doesn't get updated through integration. But that is a challenge where the people on the ground know it as something, but their maintenance management, their ERP system, put together by the accountants or whoever's done it, doesn't have the same labelling. So it is something to be mindful of and careful about. Well, I think I've gone 3 minutes over, so...
I've got one, just quick one.
Yeah, sure.
On your isolations in the digital world.
Yep.
So where you have, you touched it on, you have someone isolate a device, someone would witness that or verify that
Yep.
point's isolated.
Yes.
How do then, so say you've got 100-point isolation, and then your work party needs to lock onto that. They're not going to go around to every isolation, so what we utilise a group board, and people would lock onto that board. How do, in the digital version, do you see that happening?
Well, it still would, you would still have your physical as well as your digital in that respect. So you've still got people going around isolating. You may use digital to help with that. You may verify in the system that the points have been isolated and also second checked in the system, but there's still people that would need to lock on to something.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So currently there's a piece of paper that's got all the points documented, that it's taken care of.
Yep.
That's locked up with the locks or the keys from that isolation.
Yep.
So I'm sort of trying to envisage how we migrate that to a digital.
Well,
Like if it's all online on your
Yep.
iPad, what do I put on the board? Or what do people see when they go, I want to see that that's done?
Yeah, so you could have the the full list of the isolations printed, going with your board, and people still locking on to that.
Yeah, I suppose that's just sort of, it's still reverting back to the paper base.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. There's still a bit of both. Yeah, I take your point when you're saying about digital. I mean, it could be that that's not. It's just going to be. Sorry, I'm going round and round here. You're still going to need people locking on to that.
Yes.
So that's the crucial thing. Whether there's a printout there or whether electronically in the system you can see that this is the particular, I'll call it an isolation certificate. This is the isolation certificate that board's for. These are the isolations that have been done for that board. So that can be electronic. I mean, it will always be in the system, electronic.
Yeah,
So it could be.
Maybe there's solutions that it's done electronically, but then at the end you hit a button, it prints out, and you attach that to your thing for people to.
That's how I've seen it.
Yep.
So basically, the isolations are kind of in the system. You go out, you implement them. Obviously, that you've got your physical locks, your tags, you're doing that. Then you go around and verify. Basically, the verification, from how I've seen it, you could either print that out, go and verify it, or potentially in the system if you had a mobile device. But ultimately, then when your work parties are ready to start, you basically have that printed copy on the permit board. They all lock onto that.
Yeah.
Just to add a little bit on that, the status itself of the certificate, you can keep track of that on the system. So electronically, you keep track of the status of that. If it's been issued, it has to be verified to be able to move to the issued status.
Yep.
Yeah. So those status of the workflow will indicate if you have isolated or not, if you have verified or not. And you can have that printed version as well if you want to.
Yep.
If you wish to do so.
Yeah. But that physical lock component, that's never going to go away in terms of that locking.
Yeah.
So you've got to have the ability to lock on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just sorry, I'm bugging. Is there any legislative things that still require certain things to still be paper-based? Like I thought the confined space entry is a good one, right? So say my device goes flat, it hasn't synced, it hasn't whatever, there's no backup. If I've got people in a hole, I want to know that they're coming out.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I don't know the full answer for that. You would want a system that, like you say, if a device is going to go flat, that is a problem. You need to know who's in there, and you need to, yeah. So maybe it wouldn't be used exactly in that way. I don't know. But
Legislatively, I think the words will be
you'll need to record,
I don't
yeah.
think you'll see detail at the level of, you shall have continuous access to, but obviously the use cases, like you said,
Hmm.
you want to be able to see that, you can consider that, but legislatively, I think in most states, you must have a record of. So you're right, if your record is electronic, you could be at a point where you don't have access to that record when you need it.
Mm. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, that take away mobile device, your computer system could go out or whatever. So
What I've seen, what I know is for people who do use electronic confined space in and out, then having that entry and exit done electronically, they've got the record for the future. They also use like an A-frame board where
Yep.
they're hanging a tag. And so even in that situation where you lost you've got that visual board.
Mm.
And I've seen the use case of the visual board is in an emergency. The rescue team can turn up, not need paperwork or a system, and just see visually this is how many people we're looking for.
anyway, we'd better stop now because we've gone over time. But thank you very much for attending today. I'll be at the speaker's corner or whatever it's called. I've forgotten what it's called. So if you'd like to come and chat, I'd love to talk some more with you about some of this. Yeah, I hope it's been an informative session. Thank you.